Good morning, and welcome to the Financial Pillars All About the Money podcast presented by Our Neutral Voices Media. Our show is all about helping our audience understand money, mindsets, and tap into the economic knowledge that builds financially secure individuals, families, and communities. So whether you're tuning into our show to learn about budgeting, building credit, investing, or starting your own business, we're here to break down the knowledge in a real and relatable way. Back to having a full house here today with our man Ben after a few weeks off with a vacation and a back injury. So start off with a few introductions. My name is Ryan Leopard. I'm a private banker with Star Financial Bank.
I'm JJ Foster, loan originator with Lake City Bank.
Ben Weibel, branch manager at Flagstar Bank.
And I am a universal business banker with Greenway Bank.
I love that title.
That's what I was going to say. He always just top everybody. Universal.
Yeah. Well, we'd save you for the end. Yeah. So, gentlemen, JJ sent us an article last night about a gentleman I was not familiar with that we want to kind of lead into our conversation with. I'm sure everybody out there listening is familiar with the Apple story, Steve Jobs. Was it
Steve Wozniak?
Wozniak, is that how you pronounce it? But I was unfamiliar with this man. There was a third individual that helped kick off the company with him. That man is Ronald Wayne. Okay, so as the story goes, the three of them got together. The other two, Steve and Steve, were a little bit younger in their years, early 20s. This gentleman, they all met at Atari, I believe. He was a little bit older, so had a little bit more experience, so they brought him in. Steve and Steve are 45% owners, and this gentleman was 10% owner. Their partnership didn't last too long. So he's kind of famous for having sold out 12 days after Apple launched for $800, right? His 10% share in today's value would be $300 billion had he held it and shares not been diluted and a bunch of other things there too. So, JJ, obviously a little background on that story there, but why did you think this would be a good topic of conversation for us to have on the show?
Like you say, is a footnote in history that, a lot of people don't know anything about. And the first thing that jumped out to me is, I was like, man, we could use this literally as a case study about everything that we've actually talked about when it comes to investing, when it comes to being unique to one's own situation, because regardless, we can look at it about how much money there was. When you're talking about stuff that's on the ground floor, the grassroots level, like we said, you had Mr. Wayne is an older gentleman with these two young hotshots. They didn't have, like they say, two nickels to rub together. Mm-hmm. He was the only one that had a family that was stable. So it's like, man, if this falls through, people going to come back. I'm going to be on the hook. So therefore, he's looking at it. He knew they were, some bright individuals, but he wasn't comfortable with moving forward with that investment. So, in his mind, hey, it wasn't the right time. And I mean, as he did in the article, he rationalized why, he had got out. Those guys, again, if it crashes and burns, they can start out, they can go somewhere else. For him, it would have been, like he said, career suicide. He'd have been done. So he kind of pulled out of it. And, hindsight, if we only knew, what stuff was.
Hindsight's 2020 on that.
Correct.
But the interesting part about reading this gentleman is, if he had regret, he would kill himself. I shouldn't say kill himself, but he would just beat himself up over all these years about how rich he could be. But listening to him and reading this article, he seems to have no regrets and can justify his rationale for it. So you gentlemen have a chance to take a look at it?
Yeah, of course. Pretty much when I read it, the only thing that pretty much hit home to me is in terms of investing. Of course, typically what you hear a lot in the investing environment is when you are younger that they want you to invest more aggressively because you have the time to pretty much make up for it. If you do, of course, come up with a few losses or something like that, you will have time for the market to rebound, so you could potentially get a return on your investment. Of course, when you are older, they typically want you to be in that like moderate, more conserved because you're closer to that retirement age. These are the funds that you need for your retirement. So of course, I understand his standpoint from where he was coming from, because once you're closer to that retirement age, you don't have time to be out here risking money. You can't just throw thousands of dollars into something not knowing if you're going to get it back or not. So I understand that point of view from him because he had no idea what was going to happen. And the part of the article that stuck out to me the most was the $15,000 that he borrowed.
Yep.
Again, you don't even have two nickels to rub together. Like, how am I supposed to be able to pay that back?
And to clarify that for our audience out there, it wasn't so much them putting money into it. It was them taking out debt that the other two really had nothing to lose if that debt went back. He did. He had a house, he had cars, he had things like that the bank could come and take that as collateral, right?
Of course, and it's just like also the other shows that's out there, a famous TV show, Shark Tank. That is a great example that I also thought about as well. You know, people are coming in with their business ideas, they're trying to pitch it to these people that they want to potentially invest into their companies. If it's too much of a risk, they're not going to do it. But of course, if there is a larger probability that there's going to be a greater return on that investment, that's something that people are more willing to move forward with. So at the same time, of course, he was comfortable with his decision at the same time, but if he would have stayed in, he would have stuck with the process. Of course, he could have been even more rich than what he is now. But also at the same time, it also hints home to you always need to do what's best for you at the time.
Absolutely.
But is he rich? How rich
Yeah.
is he?
That I don't know. I was
Yeah.
interested when you said it too.
Yeah.
I didn't read anything
Yeah.
into the article to see if it said anything about that,
Right, and his
but I don't know
quote
where
was,
status is today.
I've never been rich, but I've also never been hungry.
So there you go. But yeah, so he was comfortable because we're
comfortable.
talking billion. That's what makes this article something. But go ahead, Ben.
So one thing that really stood out to me was pretty much it all took me back to the foundation when they were forming the company. Here is somebody who has 10% ownership of a company that is worth billions of dollars today, and they did not have the same mindset. So it all took me to the two Steves. They seem to have really similar personalities. They are risk takers. They're very aggressive. They have confidence with their brand. And they're going to launch this company against all odds. Here's someone with a 10% ownership, which would likely be worth billions today, who isn't willing to really put in the equal foot or just even a step to the formation of a company. So it really drawed me now towards our daily life. Now, whether this person is regretting or not, I'm not sure, but I would really think there's a part of me that would regret if I missed out on millions. I watched a documentary last
Billions.
night. Billions.
Billions.
Yes. And I watched a documentary last night, and there was a part of him that was like, they showed him at a casino trying to win. And he's trying he tried to tell the Apple story and maybe, like sell books and things like that. But it just drew me now to the foundation. He didn't have the faith that the company would really repay back the loan that they were borrowing. I really understand it was a risky move. It was also mainly on the personalities of them both. I think he was more of a philosopher. The other two really had faith with the product. They had faith with their brand, and they were going to launch it against all odds. So yeah, it was a really unique opportunity for me to really kind of like take a look in and really look at different life stages, understand levels of risk for certain individuals. But again, I'm not going to forget the fact that somebody had a 10% ownership. He could have generated billions in this and did not even have an ounce of faith that they can pay this back.
Yeah, and something you said there reminded me of a part of his story that I remember now when you mentioned the casino there. To give full context to his decision, he had previously been involved with starting a business prior to this with slot machines, and that business failed. So he did have experience with going out doing it, but it didn't work out for him, which I'm assuming also helped lead to this. I can't fail again, right? It's going to be all on me.
And that's what I was going to say. I mean, we're focused on the billions, and that's why it is a story to tell. But how many guys are out there that have been all in, that was hanging with some young hot shots, that had all the answers? Hey, they mortgaged everything, the house, the cars, kids' college education, because they had a can't miss product.
Yeah. So I can relate to this story very, very well. Personally, I wasn't out there hanging with hot shots and billionaires or anything like that. But in my transition from, my previous bank to where I'm at now, I didn't leave there to come here. I left there for an opportunity to go own and run my own State Farm insurance agency, right? Take over an existing one, be the owner operator of it. Now, throughout that process there, and I made the jump into it, there's a 5-month training program. A lot of things came to light within the agency I was taking over. I would like to say it had nothing to do with State Farm. It was the situation I was going into. I found a lot more about the book of business that I was taking over, and it didn't look too good, where it was at, and ultimately where I was at in my life, right? I was mid-40s when I'm making this decision. when I was going into this process, speaking with some other agents, they're like, "You're how old, man? If you don't do it now," like, and they kept. I didn't get it at the time, but they were saying, you're kind of on the old side of that thing. As I was getting into it and started thinking more about it, I realized why, because I don't have time to make this up. If this doesn't work, by the time it's going to 5, 6, 7 years before I know if this is actually going to be the end for me, or the end result, or if I got to find another career. Well, now I'm in my 50s trying to start it over if this doesn't work. So the risk became a little bit more. I got kids. I'm not single in my 20s or 30s trying to do this. I have houses. I got, where I'm at in my stage of life, it just wasn't the right decision. And for me, it ended up being the right decision on there, because the week I would have opened up taken over and opened up my location, the location flooded. Everything was flooded. They they didn't find a replacement for that branch. They ended up just distributing that book of business, what was left of it, because I had a bunch of fraud and things like that, to a couple of other agents. So for me, I had the same kind of thought process with him, is this the right time for me? If I was in my 30s, I would have gone through with it, no problem. 20s, absolutely. But where I was at in my life, it was too much of a risk to mortgage my kids and the house and all that stuff on it. And for me, it ended up being the right decision. I didn't miss out on billions. Missed out on some insurance claims.
I'm just curious on the $800 that he received. Was that life-changing?
I have no idea where you would have came up with $800 to sell out, but in today's value, that'd be worth about $4,400.
They said he actually ended up getting $1,500. If that helps you anyway.
Well,
but I think another thing that ties into it is where he was at currently in his life standing. Of course, he had worked, he had some type of savings, he had some type of cash revenue stashed somewhere that he could rely on if things got tough. Hinting back to the fact that he said that they didn't have two nickels to rub together. So essentially, if you take, me, Ben, and JJ, and we go borrow $15,000, and you two have $0 to your name, and we're not making money from our business that we just started, but we still have to make that payment back to the bank, who does that fall on? Mm-hmm. So essentially, he probably thought, okay, well, I'm going to be the one that has to foot that bill because they don't even have a nickel to their name. Why should I have to sacrifice my own savings, the money that I worked for? And I'm sure back then wages were a lot lower than what they currently are now. So just imagine how long it would take to make $15,000 to have to pay that back to a bank. So it was probably something that he thought about long term. It's like, this is not something that I'm set up for. This is not something that I can handle as of right now. I'm going to go ahead and bow out.
Yeah. I think 1978, is that what we're the date? 76, 78, something like that. So $15,000 now doesn't seem like a whole lot of money, but especially for starting a business like that. But back then it was. To your point on the $1,500 that he received, how about the foresight of the other two to offer that? They sold the 800, the 10% for $800, but to have the foresight to come in and say, hey, if we're going to give you this $1,500, if you sign off on all future rights to come back and try and reclaim anything or anything like that, and he accepted it, right? Those were two young individuals starting their business, but had the foresight to understand that, hey, we could, maybe he'll come back and try and sue us or something like that later on. Let's get out of it for $1,500. They believed in what they were doing.
Oh, no question. Yeah, they definitely were all in. And it's funny because I know you touched on where they talked about, when they brought opened it to the public, and so their shares were diluted too. But I mean, you think about how much he stood to make $75 billion. That was his share. But okay, what you gonna dilute it? He would have only made $5 billion, $4 billion. I mean, again, you're still talking about something with a B. I actually had another point that I lost because that I wanted to take it down, but I can't even think of it. I've lost my train of thought.
I'm sure it'll come back to you.
But I'll say this: there are several examples of folks. I've got my grandfather, my uncles, my dad. They used to take trips back to Vegas back in the day. Vegas would fly people out, take them out, show them this desert land, and want to get investors to help build up. So now imagine flying out there, and they're looking at this desert land like, kind of laughing. Didn't take them up. But I don't know what kind of dollar amount there is right now, how much they missed out on. But had they took up, when you go out to Vegas now, you think about it, Vegas is moving closer and closer to California and being one, because that's what they're building up. But a lot of times you have to have that vision to see certain things. No, this is what I was going to say. Out of every we look at this and we talk about it. Ronald Wayne made an informed decision. That was best for him.
Yes.
You gave an example. He made an informed decision. That's all you can do. I mean, you take your information. Hey, if it's something for you, you go for it. If not, hey, I'm gonna gracefully step out. The other thing that came to my mind was, there's a saying out there that talks about complacency and status quo. And when you get people that get in the workforce and you get comfortable and everything that we talked about, this guy has a family, he had a job, a good paying job. Those other two guys didn't have nothing to lose. So you get people risk. That's what risk takers do. Mm-hmm. They're not, it's like, hey, I'm not into this 9 to 5. I don't have any insurance to worry about. I don't have a wife and kids. Hey, I can take a bigger risk if I want. But when you got that status quo, hey, I got health insurance, I got a steady paycheck coming in. Hey, you and these ideas that you have, they hit a little bit different.
Yeah, like I said, that's my exact experience right there. It's like, to me, the risk wasn't worth the potential reward to, I got young kids, right. I don't want their lives to have to change. And, we got to sell the house and get a smaller one if this doesn't work out, something like that, maintain that status quo there for it. But it really does take, I believe small business owners, large business owners, anything like that, entrepreneurs itself is a trait that they have in themselves. They're not opposed to risk out there. It doesn't scare them away. I really believe that they don't sit back and look at a venture that didn't work out. Most successful business owners have had failed businesses, right? Correct. But they have something in them. They have that trait. They have that drive to keep on going, that vision to see something through, and eventually something hits. Right, and then that just takes some places.
And really, I believe there is lessons to be learned on both ends, both on the two Steves and on Ronald Wayne. Looking at the two Steves, you're looking at people who really had a huge belief with the product, with the brand that they were going to launch. They were very passionate and they were going to go against all odds. And yet they gave someone 10% ownership. And yet maybe this person, 10% ownership is still a significant amount. Oh, yeah. And so they had somebody. Do you think
they knew that 10% was going to be $300 billion at that time?
I truly believe they did. Yeah.
I don't know. At that time, I don't know if anybody could fathom $3 billion back in the 70s, but yeah.
And so mainly when you look at it, here is they had a partner who could have pulled them back. Just think about that thought, about these two giant minds that ended up creating this Apple product that everybody has. Just think about the influence that the 10% owner would have had if they started pulling those people back. Would we have Apple today?
Yeah.
No, that's a great point. So, great point.
Yeah, and then also on the other part of Ronald is really looking at the feasibility. If the three of you came up to me and said, I have this business idea, the analytical side of me would like to really understand the product. Before I even become a 1% owner, I would like to understand the product. I would like to understand the stability of it. I would really like to understand the market niche of it. I would want to understand how profitable would want to be. I would want to assess all the risks that would want to be. I don't believe there's any business that would start without a capital. And so the first question would be, what would be the capital to really take? And that's where, on both ends, you look at the lessons learned from that and you say, well, the two Steves, did they adequately discuss capital that was needed to start the business? On the other hand, did he also evaluate that and really see what are we going to do to get this home to end up launching this product? Then also, too, it translates to me today. The market is very volatile. And I can just remember COVID times where our 401k went down 20-30%. The market was very volatile during that time frame. Supply and demand affected a lot of organizations. And so when you really look at that, there's a lot of resilience. Even after post 2008, when we were in the deep recession, the market was down big way. Real estate was down, but come 2009, 2010, it slowly rebounded. And so in our everyday life, whether it's in the market, whether it's in our entrepreneurship, there is risk. And the question is, how much can we stomach it? Are we resilient enough to go through it while still also assessing our daily life? We take risk at our daily jobs. Like when we sign up for a job, we take a risk. When we switch companies, we take a risk. For instance, when you're in a company for a long time and you've been there 10 years, somebody can be very reliant to say, oh my gosh, I'm very familiar with this. This is a familiar territory to me. It brings me security. This is where I pay my bills. Yet, in hindsight, they could go to company B where they will prioritize, they will get more money, they would even be. But then that security of just sticking to what we know and not wanting to take the step forward really pulls us back. That security of wanting to stay within our zip code and not wanting to move to a different town because this is all we know really pulls us back to stepping out to the unknown. So really there's no win or loser in both ends. There's really lessons to be learned in what could all the three of them have done different to at least make sure at least it all worked out. Two of them won, but one of them is out of billions.
And thinking about the story now, or have any of you three seen the movie The Network, the Facebook story?
Yes, sir.
Right? So that's kind of similar situation. But if you remember that movie, they phased some of the early partners out of the company, diluted their shares, kind of kicked them on down the road. Now, I believe those all settled in lawsuits and they ended up with millions, maybe not billions, I don't know. But they got some money out of that too. But that's not to say that, had he stuck with it, that they wouldn't have done the same thing to him. He may not have ever reached that 3 billion. He may have some millions and things like that. Yeah. But in fair context for that, he wasn't the brains behind the operation. They were. Right. They were the computer guys. They were the ones that had the vision. He was kind of the older, more experienced business guy with the paperwork and all that could help him kick it off. How soon down the road before they realize, well, we don't need him as a 10% owner anymore. Let's find a way out of this. We can hire somebody at an hourly or salary to come in and do the job that he's doing, right? That's business.
I beg to differ a little bit, though, because you're right. His 10% says who he was. You're right. They're 45 and 45. 10, he's a value member of the team. And then what Ben said, I mean, it's like everybody had their place. So, he was motivated. He could have been there dragging them down. Oh, this ain't gonna work. I think they would have got rid of him. But the fact that
that's the network, the Facebook story. Yeah. One guy didn't see the vision that the other ones did, and said, "Well, we're gonna move on without you," and they phased him out.
but in this, I'm telling you, those guys. I mean, it was a team. I mean, he had his role, he had his place, and they recognized it. But he opted out himself. But other than that, I think. Would Steve been as effective if he wasn't there in the beginning? I think it was a good team, and the fact that, like I said, 10 to 45 and 45 lets you know what your value is. Your worth is your worth, but it's not as big as obviously that 45 and 45.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yep. T, anything to add to it?
Well, based off of the decisions that were made, of course, back then. And based off of where the company is now. And I think one of the most important aspects is the fact that he was able to come to terms with his decision. Like you said, you mentioned he didn't regret it. That is one of the biggest things. Like, of course, buyer's remorse is something that a lot of people experience. That was not something that he experienced. Of course, like JJ also mentioned at the same time, it was a well-informed decision.
Yeah, and I think the way it was he made the best decision for him at the time based upon the information he had at the time, right? So very important decision at the time. You can't see into the future.
Right.
And I do believe a lot of people face this in their lives where they're faced with a decision. You can either be a simple yes or no question. Some people have said no. Down the road, they'll look back and they might be slightly regretful that they didn't take that opportunity, or they didn't decide to move to a different state, or they didn't do something that was extremely life-changing. But the individuals that are non-regretful and have come to terms with the things that they've done and the decisions that they made, I feel like they are more confident to move forward with making more risky decisions in the future. Now, those individuals that are typically more regretful of the decisions that they didn't make, I don't think that actually educates them and helps them make better informed decisions in the future. Of course, anytime you make a life-changing decision, you should always weigh the pros and cons. Of course, just like you mentioned as well, Ryan, with taking over that potential agency. You had kids, you had the house, you had the car, you were later in life, of course. Not a major risk taker, of course. There was too much at stake for you to lose at that time. So you made an informed decision as well. You did what was best for you at that time. So pretty much what it just hints at is, if you're faced with a great opportunity, of course, take some time, talk it over, think about it. Consider the pros and cons and make the best informed decision that you possibly can. But you also have to remember you need to do what's best for you at the time. Of course, it's always good to think short term and long term. But at the end of the day, you always need to be thinking about what's best for you at the time.
Yeah. Where's the group from Commodore VIC-20? See, y'all probably don't know about that.
No clue what you just said.
Exactly. That was like the first computer that came out. So I'm telling you. But again, that was the latest, greatest. I'm sure, hey, they had a group of guys, I don't know what they're worth, what happened to them. So at the end of the day, we can sit here where we at, sit up here and talk about, oh yeah, he messed up. But again, no, he made what was best for him. He did.
Yeah, so see, on the surface, it sounds like, somebody reads this and he messed up because he missed out on $300 billion. In all reality, that's not the moral of the story, right? Moral of the story is the choices that we make, and you have to make the best decisions for you. How did you put it with the household?
You're unique to our household. Everybody, and Terrence will tell you, every workshop, you're in a workshop with me, that's what I'm going to tell you. Hey, I can't do what Ben does. I can't do what Terrence does. All I know is my life situation, my personal finances, where I am in this world. So that's what you have to stay true to that. So.
Yeah, and when you make your decisions, you live with those decisions. Don't sit back with regret and beat yourself up because you missed out on $300 billion. I don't know. I might beat myself up over that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
It depends.
I've had a couple of just stock investments that I would have done really well on had I not sold out when I would. But at the end of the day, I made money and sold when I did. So I made money on them. I just did not make nearly as much as I could have had I stuck with it.
Look, this, and we could say win some, lose some. No, this ain't one of those win some, lose some.
You lost everything.
That's a whole different.
I think
context.
it also depends too, because even with him having a 10% stake in the company, say they had their round table meeting and he proposed an idea and he convinced everybody to get on board with that, but it was the difference between the business failing and succeeding. Mm-hmm. I mean, that could have been a turning point for the company, but also at the same time, just you gotta take multiple perspectives, man. You gotta take multiple perspectives.
He might be Ronald Wayne's nephew. He over here rationalizing.
Yeah,
but
he wants to know why he missed out on the inheritance.
Hey! I know I'm gonna be good. I ain't got nothing to worry about.
But probably got your ice cream cone from Zesto or something, with that 1,500.
Right. Well, I mean, wait, but also at the time, 1,500 back then it was a lot more than what it was back then. So he probably could have went and got a new car. He probably took a vacation with that money.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know what the 1,500 is. I think maybe $8,000 or something like that. But they said the 800 that he got was in today's value $1,500, which still seems very, very minimal.
Absolutely
for that. But I guess $1,500 for 12 days of work, right? He was with him for 12 days. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, running short on time, but JJ, I know you had another topic you wanted to kind of give a public service announcement. We'll save that one
next time.
Okay.
It's time. It's a tease. You got to tune in next time. We got something, nice little, like you said, public service announcement. But on another public service announcement, we do have our third part of our youth financial series coming up, YouSense. It'll be coming up July 23rd at the Fort Wayne Urban League, 2135 South Hannah Street. The time is 6 to 8. So if you have any young people with the grades of 6 to 12, bring them on out. Come on. Even if they didn't participate in the first two sessions, they're still welcome to come out in the third. And this third session is going to be the best session. It's going to be fun. We're actually going to have a reality store set up with about 10 different stations. And if you ever played the game of life, that's pretty much summarizes what the reality store is all about. The kids will get a scenario, they get a certain amount of money that they'll get to go around, visit different scenarios, and learn how to balance and spend their money. So great family activity for you. We will feed you. Again, I always talk about feeding you physically with great food and feeding you with knowledge. So come on out, help support, and that's my service announcement for today.
All right. Hope to see you all there. But until next time, for Terrence, Ben, JJ, my guys over here, we are Our Neutral Voices. See you later. Peace.